Delta is the biggest airline in America by revenue. For years, it flew proudly with Boeing, the symbol of American aviation. But now, something has changed. Delta is quietly choosing Airbus, a European rival once seen as the outsider. Now the question is, why would America's leading airline turn away from Boeing, the nation's pride, and place its trust in Airbus instead? The answer could rewrite the future of the global airline industry. If you're new to the crew, make sure to like and subscribe so you're in the know of what's new in the world of aviation. For decades, Delta and Boeing have enjoyed a solid relationship. The airline built much of its empire on Boeing classics like the 727, 757, and the wide-ranging 767. If you flew Delta in the 90s or early 2000s, odds are you were stepping onto an American-built Boeing jet. The two companies weren't just partners, they were symbols of American aviation working hand in hand. Boeing represented pride and tradition, and Delta was its most loyal stage. But in recent years, a quiet shift has taken hold. Delta has started putting more and more faith in Airbus, Boeing's European rival. The change began with narrow bodies like the A321neo, which Delta ordered by the hundreds. Then came the fuel-efficient wide bodies, the A330neo for transatlantic hops and the A350 for ultra-long-haul routes. This wasn't dabbling, it was building a new foundation. By January 2024, the shift became undeniable. As per Airbus's press release, Delta placed a major order for 20 Airbus A350-1000s, the largest version of Airbus's flagship jet. And by March 2025, Delta's backlog of pending aircraft deliveries stood at 285 jets, most of them Airbus models like the A220-300 and A321neo. This is more than a fleet decision. For the biggest airline in America by revenue to lean this heavily on Europe's Airbus is nothing short of dramatic. A quiet pivot? Yes, but one that could potentially decide who gets to have an upper hand in the aviation of the future. To understand why Delta might be leaning away from Boeing, you have to look at the storm Boeing has been trapped in. The 737 MAX crisis shook the entire industry. Two tragic crashes in 2018 and 2019 led to a worldwide grounding, eroding confidence in Boeing's engineering and oversight. Airlines suddenly questioned the safety and reliability of what was supposed to be Boeing's workhorse. For Delta, an airline that prizes safety above everything, that memory is unsettling. Then there's the 787 Dreamliner, which was meant to be Boeing's crown jewel. Instead, it was marred by production delays, quality control issues, and delivery halts that stretched on for years. Airlines counting on the Dreamliner to fuel their growth were left waiting. Meanwhile, Airbus stepped into the vacuum. The A321neo became the gold standard in narrow bodies, efficient, comfortable, and available. On the wide-body side, the A330neo and A350 gave airlines reliable, fuel-saving jets without the baggage of Boeing's crises. Now the big question is, why would America's biggest airline by revenue lean away from America's pride, Boeing, and quietly stack its future on Airbus? Is this just smart math or a loss in faith? What does Delta see in Toulouse that it can't rely on in Seattle? Let's find out. Delta's shift toward Airbus may feel shocking, but it's not entirely out of character. This is an airline with a long history of doing things its own way. While other US carriers rushed to standardize their fleets with Boeing, Delta zagged. Back in the 80s, instead of doubling down on the 737, Delta went big on the McDonnell Douglas MD-88s. It stuck with those aircraft for decades, flying them long after most airlines retired theirs. Delta has always believed in squeezing value out of older jets and flying against the grain. Even in recent decades, Delta made contrarian moves. Where others dumped aging aircraft quickly, Delta invested in refurbishing cabins and keeping planes in service longer. It was never about following trends. It was about finding a strategy that worked for Delta's unique model. That independence is part of its DNA. So when you see Delta leaning toward Airbus while other US airlines like United and Southwest stick tightly with Boeing, it's no accident. It's Delta being Delta, zigging when everyone else zags, rewriting the rules of fleet strategy and reminding the industry that it plays by its own book. Start with the cold math. Newer Airbus jets drink less fuel. The A321neo cuts fuel burn versus old narrow bodies. The A350 slashes it even more versus previous generation wide bodies. Lower fuel burn means lower cost per seat, which compounds over thousands of flights. Maintenance is the second trap. On the Airbus side, the Neo family brings lower airframe upkeep versus older models, and the long-haul A330neo and A350 share systems that simplify spares and routines. Every percent saved there shows up directly in operating margins. Production reliability is the third. Delta needs airplanes that arrive on time. Airbus has been delivering at scale and holding the industry lead lately. Boeing, meanwhile, has wrestled with the MAX saga and repeated Dreamliner delivery pauses. That uncertainty is expensive for an airline planning crews, gates, and schedules a year out. Training is the quiet superpower. Airbus builds around common cockpits. Pilots can move within the A320 family and step to A330 and A350 with differences in training, not a full reset. That shrinks training time, keeps more pilots in the seat, and gives scheduling teams real flexibility when the network hiccups. Put it together and the picture sharpens. Fuel burn down, maintenance down, deliveries steadier, training simpler. None of these win the headlines by themselves, but together they change the risk math. For an airline obsessed with operational reliability and cost per seat, the Airbus path isn't just a bet, it's a hedge against volatility. Delta isn't the kind of airline that makes flashy, impulsive moves. Its reputation has been built on pragmatism, discipline, and contrarian bets that usually pay off. One of the best examples? Its strategy of buying used aircraft when everyone else was chasing new deliveries. Instead of shelling out billions for factory-fresh planes, Delta scooped up second-hand MD-90s, 737-900s, and even 777s at bargain prices. With its in-house maintenance division, one of the best in the world, Delta stretched the life out of those jets and saved billions in capital expenses. This buy smart, fly long strategy set Delta apart. While rivals were burdened with debt from big orders, Delta kept costs lean and margins healthy. It's a playbook rooted in discipline, not hype. That same mindset is at work in its Airbus pivot. Delta isn't rushing to Airbus because it's trendy. It's because the economics, delivery reliability, and training advantages make sense within Delta's long-term philosophy. If anything, history shows Delta is the least likely airline to gamble recklessly. When Delta makes a move this decisive, the industry pays attention because it usually signals a well-calculated shift rather than a leap of faith. Delta's 100th anniversary isn't just a milestone, it's a turning point. At CES 2025, Delta and Airbus doubled down on a partnership that feels less like a transaction and more like a blueprint for the future of aviation. Airbus's Up Next Innovation Lab and Delta's Sustainable Skies Lab are now tightly linked, fast-tracking experiments in wing performance, new materials, superconductivity, and flight assistance systems. Delta won't just be a customer, it'll be an active co-tester, shaping how tomorrow's airplanes are designed and flown. That means new ideas like Airbus's fellow fly technique inspired by migrating geese, which allows one jet to ride the uplift of another, cutting fuel burn by as much as 5%. Delta is already committed to the next test phase in 2025. Then there's the big sustainability play. Airbus has joined Delta's Minnesota SAF hub to accelerate production of sustainable aviation fuel, widely seen as the most immediate lever for decarbonizing flight. Delta will also be part of Airbus's Zero-E Hydrogen project and early studies into hydrogen fueling in Atlanta, the busiest airport in the world. Layer on futuristic wing designs that morph mid-flight to maximize efficiency, and you see why this collaboration feels historic. Here's the bigger picture. Delta already flies nearly 500 Airbus aircraft, with 200 more on order. Boeing is still in the mix, but Airbus is clearly in the driver's seat of Delta's next century. For two companies once seen as rivals, this partnership hints at something larger. The idea that the future of US aviation can be co-written by Delta and Airbus. And for Boeing, long regarded as America's pride in the skies, it's a wake-up call. It needs to play its cards the right way. But that's not it. Delta's obsession with innovating for the future doesn't just end with Airbus. Yeah, Delta is partnering with California-based startup JetZero to help bring its revolutionary blended wing body BWB aircraft to life, a design promising up to 50% greater fuel efficiency than today's tube and wing jets. Announced as Delta celebrates its centennial, the collaboration is part of the Sustainable Skies Lab and supports the airline's net zero by 2025 goal. JetZero, backed by the US Air Force grant to fly a demonstrator by 2027, gains Delta's unmatched operational expertise to make the aircraft commercially viable. Beyond efficiency, Delta will co-design the cabin, rethinking everything from accessibility to overhead bins, creating a more comfortable and inclusive experience for both customers and employees. By investing in this futuristic airframe, Delta strengthens its role as a leader in aviation innovation, signaling that the next century of flight will be defined by sustainability, bold design, and customer-focused reinvention. Before we find out what lies ahead for Delta, why don't you take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel, JetLogic. We bring amazing stories from the world of aviation every week. While Delta's partnership with Airbus can secure it a strong position as an airliner, this pivot isn't without risks. Each comes with the weight of a mini-trap that could complicate Delta's bold Airbus strategy. First, there's politics. In Washington, eyebrows rise when America's biggest airline buys European jets instead of Boeing's. Congress and regulators have long seen Boeing as not just a company, but a symbol of US manufacturing might. The optics of Airbus dominating Delta's order book could feed debates about jobs, trade balances, and national loyalty. Second, supply chains. Airbus may be riding high now, but what if production stumbles? A delay on the A321neo line in Mobile or Hamburg, or bottlenecks in A350 deliveries could leave Delta exposed. Fleet planning is fragile. Missed deliveries can ripple across schedules, pilot assignments, and passenger capacity. Third, leverage. By leaning so heavily on Airbus, Delta risks narrowing its bargaining power. When an airline has a balanced fleet split between manufacturers, it can play one against the other for pricing and delivery slots. Over-reliance on Airbus erodes that advantage. If Airbus stumbles or raises prices, Delta has fewer cards to play. Each of these conflicts doesn't erase the logic of Delta's move, but they raise the stakes. The pivot is smart, but it also ties Delta's fortunes closer to Europe than ever before. Despite the risks, Airbus fits neatly into Delta's long-term playbook. The airline has always built its brand around reliability and efficiency, and Airbus gives it both. For long-haul dominance, the A350 offers unmatched range and fuel savings, allowing Delta to connect its hubs in Atlanta, Detroit, and Minneapolis with Asia and Europe more profitably than ever. The A330neo, meanwhile, is a perfect fit for medium-haul transatlantic routes, giving Delta flexibility where it matters most. On the passenger side, Airbus jets come with built-in advantages that play well with Delta's customer-first narrative. Quieter cabins, wider seats in many layouts, and noticeably smoother flights give passengers a premium feel without premium costs. When travelers walk onto an A350, they notice the difference: less noise, better humidity, more comfort. Delta can now frame itself as future-ready. With a fleet that is younger, quieter, and greener, it signals to passengers, regulators, and investors alike that it's adapting to a changing world. Airbus isn't just a supplier here, it's a tool that lets Delta tell a story of leadership in the skies. Yet for all the optimism, it would be wrong to think Boeing has been erased from Delta's future. Boeing still matters, and in some crucial ways. Take freighters. Delta may not run a massive cargo division like FedEx, but global belly cargo still relies on wide-body efficiency. Boeing's 767 and 777 freighters remain industry workhorses, and Airbus simply doesn't have the same dominance in that space. Then there's political pressure. Boeing is still one of America's crown jewels, employing tens of thousands across multiple states. When Delta's order book tilts too heavily toward Airbus, lawmakers notice. Political influence can shape subsidies, regulatory scrutiny, and even route rights. No US airline can completely sidestep that reality. Finally, Boeing isn't standing still. Whispers of future clean sheet designs, whether a mid-market jet to replace the 757 and 767 or next-generation sustainable aircraft, still carry weight. Delta may pivot to Airbus today, but it cannot afford to burn bridges with Boeing. In aviation, hope and strategy are fragile. Airbus gives Delta confidence, but Boeing ensures balance. If there's one theme running through Delta's Airbus pivot, it's innovation. Not just in airplanes, but in how an airline thinks about procurement. For decades, US carriers have been loyal to Boeing almost by default. Loyalty was the unwritten rule of the industry, but Delta is quietly rewriting that rulebook. This isn't about nationalism or legacy, it's about value. Whoever delivers the better product, the more reliable service, and the stronger economics wins Delta's business. Airbus has done that recently, and so Delta has rewarded it with orders. But the larger signal to the industry is that Delta is playing a new kind of game: flexible, opportunistic, and data-driven. In that sense, Delta's procurement strategy could reshape the way American airlines approach fleet planning. Instead of blind loyalty, airlines may start treating manufacturers like competitors in a bidding war, forcing Boeing and Airbus to raise their game. Delta is showing that innovation doesn't just happen in factories, it happens in boardrooms too. And in doing so, it may be setting the tone for the next era of US aviation strategy. Delta's Airbus tilt is more than a procurement choice, it's a symbolic reshaping of America's skies. Airbus, once an outsider in the US market, now holds a commanding foothold inside the nation's largest airline by revenue. Each A321neo, A330neo, and A350 delivered to Atlanta doesn't just expand Delta's fleet, it chips away at Boeing's legacy of being the natural first choice. The stakes go beyond airplanes. They touch national pride, industrial jobs, and America's long-held dominance in aerospace. For decades, Boeing was untouchable on its home turf. Now, Delta's pivot raises the unsettling question: if America's biggest carrier loses faith, who follows next? The suspense continues. Is this merely a temporary tilt driven by economics and production reliability, or are we watching the opening act of a lasting realignment in global aviation power? The stage is set, but the ending isn't written. Should Delta double down on Airbus or strike a balance with Boeing? Tell us what you think in the comments below, and if you love uncovering stories that shape the skies, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It'll motivate us to keep producing more thoughtful stories around the future of aviation. And if you haven't already made sure to subscribe to this channel, do it so you don't miss out on what's coming next. Until next time, goodbye.